welcome to Leaders of Tomorrow, 18-hour special initiative that celebrates the undying entrepreneurial spirit of micro, small and medium enterprises. We are taking all of your calls, all of your email queries as well as all of your social media queries, and to answer your queries today I have with me a panel of experts. Let me start with my expert. I have first up Saloni Narayan. She's GM of the SME business at SBI. I also have Ashish Faftia. He's the CFO at Bloom Ventures. Thank you so much, both of you, for being here with us tonight. So that's our panel of experts. Let's get started right away. Our first query tonight is an email coming to us from Vikram Gandhi. He's involved in the e-commerce business, and this is his query. He says the e-commerce business is spreading its wings. He says he's a small-time retailer, and small-time retail companies like himself are facing a slow death. MSMEs have to adapt themselves to changing times. He says a bigger answer is needed, which is inclusive of India's MSME space as well as the microeconomy, and not just a technical answer. You've hit the nail on the head with that one, to talk about really how traditional businesses go hand in hand with the way things are changing as far as the economy goes. Maybe I'll start with you, Saloni. What advice do you have?
So I'll say e-commerce is here to stay, that is for sure. In the last 3 years, we have seen a boom in this sector and it's going to grow. Two of the factors which have really aided the growth, one is the internet and mobile penetration, which has really gone up, and it is expected that by 2020 we will have 50 crore mobile users in India. And the other is the demographic pattern of the country, where we have more youngsters. 65% of them are below the age of 28 or 30. So these two factors have really brought in e-commerce to the fore. Customers now look for convenience, they don't have the time and they have all the money. So this is one major factor which has really brought in this change. Having said that, I will say that the retailers, the small retailers, they should not feel threatened by this. Why? Because the nooker shops will continue to be where they are. Customers will still go to them for needs. It depends on the products which are being sold by these retailers. And yes, the customer experience for the retailer needs to improve. This is very critical for any SME who is doing an offline business. So with the aid of technology, I think this customer experience of the retailer and the customers going to these retail shops should increase. That is number one. Number two is that these retailers can collaborate with the e-commerce players. So they can also sell their products on the e-commerce. So it can be both online and offline, and they have to coexist. It's not either or, it's both.
Okay, and you're saying that the possibility of coexisting is always there?
Yeah, it's there.
Okay.
So yes, e-commerce is here for to stay, and I fully agree with Saloni. One important point is that the way you look at it also needs to change, in the sense that while you're saying you need to adapt, you can also be a beneficiary of the current e-commerce boom. So there are so many of the small players who are on the Amazon sites and Flipkart sites and Snapdeal servicing the demand that is being served by the e-commerce retailers. That having said, in terms of adaptation, there are so many Indian-based tech companies that are coming up with solutions which the SMEs can use. So there is a business called Nowfloats which helps SMEs use their cell phones to manage their reach out to the customers using their phone by way of websites and marketing campaigns and creating footfalls. There are payment gateways, and there are business like InstaMojo which facilitates payments. And then there are businesses like Zopper which are going to provide an alternative to some of these white good vendors to be able to come online and offer the products. So you can be where you are, you can just tweak a little bit of your business model here and there, a little bit of change in mindset, and you could be competing head on with the e-commerce guys and thrive, not only sustain.
That is a very non-technical answer for you, and really to sum it up, it's imperative that MSMEs, whether in the retail industry or in any other industry, jump on to the e-commerce bandwagon, and you might as well do it as quickly as you can to beat off your competition. Let's take in the next query. This is one that's coming to us on social media. On Facebook, Bhushan Nagpal has written into us, and he's raising the question of skilled labor as far as the MSME space goes. This is his question. He says there's not enough availability of skilled labor in the market. Students doing engineering courses, but they're not trained properly, so they don't land jobs because they're unaware and not effectively trained for the work that they're supposed to do. How do we guide them, and also how do we ensure that they get practical training and proper practical training? Let me come to you on that.
When you talk about skilled labor and practical training, both have different solutions. So, skilled labor is something that yes, we have been facing a challenge, and the youth is growing. The government has been taking steps to have multiple level of training programs, vocational courses through universities and colleges. So that is something which is happening on the side. And these universities, colleges, training programs are continuously now going and adapting by tying up with corporates and players in the market, so that the participants of those programs can have a sandwich approach where they can go and work with them by way of internship, training programs, and learn there. So what we need to do is also change the mindset a little, rather than just go through a involuntary training program or internship of 2 months or so. If people are willing to put in that extra effort and stretch that effort for a little more time, it definitely enhances the ability of the person to get absorbed in a larger market. And even if you are not somebody who has gone through a vocational program, going and doing internships as you study, as you do your management, is something which is useful always. So it's not only that the government initiatives will be there to support, it's also a few changes in the way we grow. Why there has been very common practice abroad that people take a break after initially pursuing their graduation. They go into the market, they study, they pursue some bit of experience, and then they come back and study further. So we will have to adapt to the changing times and acquire the skills along with the studies and books.
Okay.
So I think while in college, at least the engineering colleges, they can tie up with companies for internship of the students who are studying in their colleges. That is one very good option, say 2-3 months every year. That will give some exposure to the students. That's number one. Other than that, I think government is also coming up with a whole lot of initiatives. One is the Skill India initiative that the new government has brought about. I think that will lead to a lot of, because yes, we have the resources, that's true, but this resource is not really skilled. So we really need to skill them, no doubt about it. And I think various initiatives are being taken at various levels. I mean, it's not just the government, it is also the private bodies who are coming forward and doing this. So I think another 5-10 years, the skill gap will definitely come down.
We get a lot of queries which are related to finance, and the next set of queries are related, of course, the availability of manpower in the industry. One thing that a lot of experts tell us is that companies should undertake training at an individual level, but is that a cost that an MSME, you think, in your opinion, or a startup or an entrepreneur can necessarily afford to take on?
I don't think they can really afford to take on this cost. This is an additional that selection of the employee. I mean, a skilled employee is important for the MSME. They can't afford this training. For a big organization like maybe State Bank of India, yes, we have a big, huge vertical training our people 364 days a year. But for a small SME unit, this is not possible.
So, in the current scenario, one can take use of tech. So when you go out to a lot of startups which are there, they are venturing out to specifically take care of the training needs of employees for the SMEs and the large companies in the market. So I think if companies onboard these startups, and there are quite a few in the market, to assess the skill gaps that exist in the company, to figure out what kind of training modules need to be implemented, there are different types of companies giving all kinds of solutions. So without getting into specific names and all that, but examples of such businesses from outside of India and India, business like Metal and all, give you that kind of an assessment to figure out what can you do for your team, and then you can get into specialized modules. And that module can be administered online. And with the use of the smartphone, everybody has a smartphone access. You can not only give the training, you can also track the progress, you can also test out what has been absorption rate of that training, and maybe retrain or take steps to go beyond the standard set and train people individually if they are excelling.
Okay. Since we are talking about manpower, and since we were just talking about e-commerce, what advice would you have for MSMEs about, and we get this quite often, how do they offer roles and money which is similar to what your e-commerce company is offering? They're saying, we're finding it very hard to retain talent. Do you face that in the banking space?
For public sector, no, because our role is very, very fulfilling. It's not just linked to the monetary incentives that we get, but you get a chance to work in almost every field. So attrition is definitely not a problem with us, but private sector, yes, they always look for higher compensation, market linked compensation, all that is there. But I think it's not just the monetary compensation which is important. You have to see how much the customer, the employee is engaged with the organization. That is very critical. So, if it is very engaged, he will not leave. And say if he has done all of it, has had all of it and he has learnt all of it and can then go and set up something of his own, then again there is a chance of his leaving. So, that is, I mean, it has to be continuously, there has to be continuous dialogue between the promoter and the employees, so that the attrition rate is as low as possible.
Sure. Do you want to add to that?
So, on a specific note, startups are having challenges to hold on to people. They are trying their best to resort to compensations which are equity linked, so that people can get ESOPs along with salary compensations. But in the first place, to try and match salaries from a startup perspective or an SME perspective, it is not the right thing to do, and not sure how many people will also be able to do that. So, making sure that you have some kind of equity linked compensation for a startup is the right idea. Not going into the slippery slope of just managing cash compensation and giving hikes is something which is highly avoidable. For SMEs which are not looking to have radical scale and build very heavily, they can also get into this mode where they are market linked in terms of compensation, but have some bit of an allocation of profit share for their team and elevate people as they see some sparks.
Okay. So, Bhushan, that was a very in-depth discussion in terms of your query. Thanks for sending that in to us. It's a very pertinent query in terms of how to really manage your workforce and how to skill your workforce. Let's take a very quick break on that note. When we come back, lots more queries that have been lined up. Just stay tuned. Welcome back with us here on Leaders of Tomorrow, and we're taking in all of your queries with our panel of experts. Let's take in a Facebook query. This one is coming to us from Supriya Patil. She's written in to ask us, how do I become a part of a startup incubator? And she also wants to know what kind of startups do incubators usually look at. We just very recently did an entire show on incubators, how you can make money, can you make money on an incubator? But specifically to her question, what would you have to say?
So, it is a common practice for a lot of people who have certain technical skills or who come with certain aspirations to build a startup to go and join an incubator. In order to get there, you need to figure out what type of a business model you're looking to follow and whether that incubator has in its constitution to adopt that kind of a model. So, there are generic incubators which will go and support everything which has a certain degree of innovation and certain things that can scale with a certain point in time. And then there are specific criteria that they look for. So, whenever you're doing your research, identify whether you meet that criteria, and you can apply and engage with the incubator through their online portals and through the events that happen for startup participants. And in terms of what kind of startups the incubator looking to enroll, they're of course looking at startups that can scale, that eventually can raise capital from larger investors or seed round investors eventually, and founders that can build teams around that and grow disproportionately. So, the constitution of your business and rapid scalability using tech as a platform are critical for incubators to look at you.
All right. Do you want
So, to add to that, I was saying that for startups, I think the stage of startup is also important. So, if it's at an ideating stage, maybe it's not the right thing to do. Maybe if you have a prototype ready, you have a team which is willing to work and a sort of a business plan, then it's better to go in for this incubator.
Okay, Supriya, that's in response to your query. Thanks for writing in with that. Let's take in the next query. It's an email coming to us from Ravindra Pathak. He says he's a startup based in Baroda, and his query is that he's looking for an investor. He says he wants to know how crucial keeping an eye on bottom line is concerned versus say the sales or top line figures. So, we're essentially trying to understand whether it's a toss up between all of this. Let's start with addressing his query.
A very straight answer to the question is both are super critical. And if at all you reach a dilemma as to you to choose one over the other, do remember the fundamental fact that a startup is a business. Business exists for profit. So, one must make sure that either you have the capital to keep building the business and go for top line, and therefore even if you burn money or create losses, that's not a problem. Or you have the profitability. If you have profit, then you are not at the mercy of an investor to come and bail you out each time you run out of money. That having said, even if you have the investment and you're looking to scale very rapidly, you should make sure that some point in time before that particular capital raise goes out of your bank account, you're profitable. One must not make sure that one must not go for just blind turnover games, deep discounting. It is not helping beyond a point. It might help you momentarily, it might get you some eyeballs, but this, at the end of it, it's profit that matters. This is my personal view and I strongly believe in it.
Okay, since you're talking about capital, let me put you on the hot seat. A lot of the MSMEs and entrepreneurs write into us and say, hey, I'm looking for investors. I've written to so many, VCs or private equity guys. No one wants to invest in me. What advice do you have?
Don't take investment as a benchmark of how good or how successful you are or you are likely to become. There are so many business models that probably don't warrant support from an investor, whether it's a VC or a PE. These, in our jargons, we call them lifestyle businesses. They can start with a very small capital from a little founder's money or promoter's money and friends and family pitching in, can scale very well using debt and keep building on. Now, some of these business models which typically a VC looks at, tech driven, very rapidly scalable, eventually will get them an exit on a multiple of 20, 30, 40 times, might not be the model that you are pursuing, and that's perfectly fine. After all, how many businesses in India get catered by a business which is funded by a VC? So it will touch everybody, but how many of those business models are always going to be funded by VCs which are not in that horizon? Many more.
Do you want to add anything?
I think you said it all.
All right. So, Ravindra, essentially talking about investors, that's a response to your query. Let's take in the next one, and this is a Facebook query. It's come to us on social media, and we'll tell you in a bit how to reach us on social media. Mukesh Marwa has written in asking what measures startup companies can take to retain employees, and we were just talking about this, but he wants to know how to retain employees, especially when they're constantly switching jobs, and we were talking about this earlier. So one part is of course hiring, but the other is retaining, and you were saying, offer those challenging roles. For a small setup, which doesn't have say more than 25-30 employees, what advice would you have about offering those challenging roles to be able to retain them?
One is of course the organic growth that the company or the firm should provide, at least in terms of designations. I think that can easily be done. Secondly, the involvement of the employee, how to get that from that employee, that is very critical. For a small company, it is very important. I mean, if I am important to the company and the company recognizes it as such, then maybe I will not leave. So, I think that is very important. Compensation for small companies, again, it can never be market linked. So, ESOPs and all are some sort of benefits can be thought of, and there are other ways also, of course. And engagement, regular engagement, I will again repeat, it is a must for companies to stay on.
Okay, we went into this in depth earlier, so anything you want to add to that?
No, I think one should not always try and make sure somehow that you're retaining people after having got them in. When you're getting them in, one should filter smartly and take immediate steps to understand whether the person is going to be there for long and create value for the company. That's also going to help you figure out who you want to focus on retaining and what are the people you might just have to let go as they are leaving.
Okay, so that's in response to your query. Mukesh, thanks for writing in. Let's take in the next query, and this is a call coming to us from Swadesh Sharma. Go ahead, Swadesh.
May I know what are the impact of the GST on FSI or small scale units?
So, Swadesh, basically, we were talking about GST in our previous episode, but he specifically wants to know GST for small scale industry units. Is it going to be different?
There are multiple layers here. One is whether the benefits that the SSI enjoys in the current scheme of taxation would continue. Today we have manufacturing companies having a certain benefit as part of the SSI regime in the excise duties, and you have a business turnover which are less than 10 lakh threshold under the VAT regime. So some of those benefits might be pruned down, or they might be kind of evened out. So that will be definitely an impact where more and more entities will come under the fold of the regulator. That having said, when you are under the fold of the regulator and you are charging GST, you suddenly become eligible to be able to sell to larger businesses. A lot of companies are not able to sell to large businesses because they are either not tax compliant or they are not tax registered, because those large businesses are not able to take credit that is going to be available with a tax charge. You suddenly have those opportunities. In terms of compliance burden, the rate, yes, that is going to be an added disadvantage to the SSIs and the SMEs, but I think that's not something which is likely to be a negotiable going forward.
Okay, Swadesh, that's in response to your query. Thanks for calling in with your query. In fact, the next one is also a call, and this is also to do with GST. I understand Ashima is calling in with this query. Go ahead, Ashima.
Will we as a business be able to get input credit from construction costs towards rental invoices?
What would you have to say? Will businesses get input credit for GST paid?
So, construction in rental invoices. So, a very logical answer to the question is no. The GST regime will clarify this further, and one has to read the fine print, but at the outset I don't think that is possible.
Before we end the show, we have time for one last query, and this one is coming to us as an email. Shiny Ahuja has written in to us. He says he's a technology service provider. He's based in Mysuru, Karnataka. He says his business model is based on an asset light model. Wants to know what alternative collaterals are needed by banks to give him loans for his business. In our previous episode, you were talking about how banks do lend to MSMEs and startups and entrepreneurs without necessarily just have the collateral backing. What advice would you have for Shani?
So, this I will say that first thing that the borrower should understand that we don't look at collaterals to give these loans. The viability of the project, again I will say, is the most important thing, and we have various schemes wherein we give loans up to 1 crore under CGT MSE, which is collateral free. Of course, a fee has to be paid for this CGT MSE premium, but other than that we are offering such loans, and below 10 lakhs again we have another scheme. We have various schemes. I mean, banks, I don't think they really insist on collateral for loans up to 1 crore, that is for sure.
Okay. So, where is this perception that if you're a small business, you still necessarily need to have collateral is concerned?
I think without approaching banks, it's a very general kind of a perception. They have not seen that actually banks have changed a lot. And in fact, in State Bank of India, we have a whole MSME department which has 10 lakh customer base, which has a portfolio of 2 lakh crores, and we are essentially looking at only MSMEs. So, we are completely focused on them. They should approach banks, and government is also supporting all these initiatives.
Okay. Do you want to add anything?
Nothing. I think the expert has summed it up very aptly.
All right, Ash, thank you so much for your time. Thank you also, Saroni, very much for your time. So that's our wrap on this episode of Leaders of Tomorrow. Do remember that if you have any queries for our experts, you can always write in to us. The email ID is leadersoftomorrow@timesgroup.com. You can reach us on social media using the hashtag LOT or call us on that number which is on your screen. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.